Previously on Something Who. Welcome to the podcast where we take something old, a Doctor Who story from the original series, compare it with something new, one from the new series, and add something borrowed to make Something Who. Hello, I'm Richard. It's been a few weeks since the last one, but we're back with Something Who podcast as we discuss a couple of Doctor Who stories with musical content. First, we'll chew over 7th Doctor story Delta and the Bannermen from season 24. And after that, we'll examine 11th Doctor story Rings of Akhaten from the second half of Series 7. And with me to sing their praises or chorus our disapproval, we have a great lineup, headed up by our special guest, former DWM editor, Gary Gillatt.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and next up is science and astronomy writer Giles. So, hi Giles.
Hello, long time no see.
Yeah, indeed. And then we've got 3D artist, writer and researcher Gav, who we borrowed from Dalek 63 to 88 about a year or so ago and somehow forgot to return. Hi Gav.
Hello. You will release me back into the wild at some point, won't you?
Maybe. And finally, it feels like ages since the last one for most of us, but it's even longer since we've had the full team on the podcast. So welcome back to writer, raconteur and missing episodes podcaster Paul.
Hello.
So, and next we move on to Rings of Akhaten by Neil Cross. It's directed by Farron Blackburn, who also directed The Doctor, The Witch and the Wardrobe about 18 months before, or maybe it was a bit less than that in actuality. So it's 2013, we're in the run-up to the 50th anniversary. Stephen Moffat's promised more Doctor Who than ever before, although nobody can ever find that quote. Our lives are about to be overtaken by the Omnirumour, and we're just into the second half of the split Series 7. Gary, I think you had some further musings on that thought.
Yeah, well, I mean, sort of my fault you're watching this. When we discussed what we might do, I pointed out that I'd never seen this story.
Yeah.
And this was not out of any kind of moodiness on my point. It's clear I was not kind of like off the show in some way, because looking at my phone, the best way to find out how you're spending any time now is to look through your camera phone pictures for any day of the last 15 years. And I can see I was having a nice afternoon out with friends. I obviously missed it, and then I think I got back, and by that point there'd been a bad response to it, so I didn't rush to catch up. And then it was just rolled over with the next episode. But I'd just been on set for Adventure in Space and Time for the magazine, so my fan gene was buzzing. I think 2 days after Akhaten was on, I was walking to work, crossing Trafalgar Square, to discover them lowering the TARDIS on a crane for the opening scenes of the anniversary special, and everyone was sort of stood around. Oh, so it was all sort of going on, and of course the Omnirumour was in full flight. Part of that, I think, really spread through a conversation that me and Tom Spilsby had in a Pizza Express, and there was literally someone at the table behind us leaning further and further back, and it was all on Outpost Gallifrey the next day. It was literally the conversation where I went, sorry, what, you mean they found everything? So it was all go. I was up for it, but it just kind of, it passed me by, and it continued to do. And then I kind of liked the idea that I had an episode still to watch, and it sort of kept me warm. And but I've spoiled that for this. I've spoiled that for you.
Thank you.
So it means that this week I've managed to watch a brand new episode of Doctor Who that I largely enjoyed. So that's that's something for Easter week.
Excellent.
A 50% success rate on the month, is that?
Yeah.
I have a lot of gripes and various nitpicks and some fairly negative sounding things to say about this story. But the reality is I was entertained, and it made me laugh, and it looked great. And I would watch it again at some point, despite, wanting to pick it apart needlessly. But I found it weird structurally. It opens with the Clara Heavy stuff and then gets fun, and they go through the Star Wars cantina style alien bit, and it's great. And then it gets into the boring singing stuff. And before you know it, you're 20 minutes in, you're halfway through this episode, and there's no jeopardy There's no threat. There's no mystery. There's no hook. And I think that's why I've never fully engaged with it. By the halfway point of the story, I would hope that there's some kind of thrilling mystery to unravel. There's a minor bit of jeopardy where you discover that the girl doesn't want to do the thing that she's supposed to do, but then she's told, you'll be fine, and she goes away and does it. And then from that, it's suddenly all finale. It changes gear to the point where everything's suddenly the end of... I was going to say the end of the world, I'm not quite sure what it's the end of. And then you've got the big speech, which I actually didn't find as tedious this time as I did previously. And that, but it's a false start, and then you get the second ending. But for all of the spectacle at the end, it's surrounded by this very muddy setup. Structurally, you never fully understand what's at stake, what the mechanics of this world are. You get given the bloke in the chair, and you think he's the threat, and then you're told he's just the alarm clock, whatever that means. And there's singing to keep him asleep, but really the singing is about the stories, and they want to feed his soul, but they actually want to... So I get frustrated by not being able to sort of locate myself in the geography of the plot, which goes suddenly from nothing happening to everything happening, none of which I understand, and then it suddenly is over. And it just feels a bit disjointed.
Do you think? Or
too
I was
few.
wondering if it hadn't had enough. It's very unusual for this era. I was wondering how Moffat let it through, because unless, of course, is one that he wasn't allowed to touch because Neil Cross is a showrunner. But
It's not co-credited, is it? Like
No.
would,
Well, he hadn't-
would become
he hadn't
the...
started doing that by then, had he?
No, but that would become the norm. Perhaps because of things like this.
Well, one of the things I thought, because I'd made notes that basically said that once you get past the Clara parent stuff, it gets interesting, and then it ramps up and you've got an ending, and that's fine. And then the second ending that calls back to Clara's parents, I don't like it, and it makes the ending stumble. And then I read up and discovered that all of the Clara's parents stuff, including the second ending, was an addition put forward by Stephen Moffat.
Wow.
So Moffat wanted Clara's parents injecting into the start, and that resulted in the ending being related to Clara's memories when it should have been the Doctor's ending in Neil Cross's version. So I thought it was quite interesting that the misgivings I had felt about it structurally turned out to be it was showing its workings.
But the whole thrust about this part of the era is that Moffat is directing all of his efforts at the 50th anniversary special, isn't he? And it's a hell of a job for him to write that. Neil Cross has already written the one that comes later in the series.
Yeah.
And he's given this thing of, look, we've got one that needs writing, you need to go off and write it, and Moffat's not available. I mean, there's Caroline Skinner. I mean, maybe she's able to give him a hand or something. I don't know. But fundamentally, no, she's not a writer though, is she? And then Moffat comes, as you say, right back at the end and fiddles with it, I suppose, just before it goes into production.
What slipped my mind was where it was all set for Clara. I'd kind of thought of it as like a mid-life story for her, but it's her first trip in the TARDIS. It's her end of the world story. Yeah. So it's the start for Clara, but it's Jenna Coleman's fourth episode that we've seen her in. But it does only make me think of how much better End of the World is because of that extra element of kind of alienation that Rose has, that kind of culture shock, the lost in translation kind of thing that they play there, which I don't think they ever try to do again. I mean, Clara just comes and takes all this in her stride. I don't think she's ever scared, ever. She runs off after that girl like it's the most natural thing. She's been at this all her life, and it's a very peppy kind of character. But I'm just kind of lost with her. She's new but assured, and I think it's that kind of... I never gelled with her all the way through. I never knew who she was or why she was so good at it.
Yeah.
There was nothing in the mid part of the story that suggested what point in their relationship this story took place. If it hadn't been for those one or two references about the Doctor saying that she was a mystery, I would have struggled to orientate myself in her in the timeline of her character development. Whereas you compare that to Rose in The End of the World, where she's very green, she's alarmed by everything, and she grows as the adventures go on. But the other interesting comparison to The End of the World is that story is about Rose's world coming to an end. So it has the emotional resonance of her sort of questioning what humanity's fate is, and there's a tiny little environmental thing in there as well. But it's all about the Doctor trying to impress her with the end of the world, and it's literally the destruction of her planet, and he just thinks it's a big wheeze. Whereas Clara has no connectivity to the Akhaten location, so it's kind of divorced of any real reward for her in terms of her investment. So they have to sort of manufacture this connection to this little girl instantly so that she has something to root for in this world, because otherwise what have you got? You've got a dog barking bloke and other weird alien head people.
I'm not even sure how much the Doctor is interested in Clara as a person, because he's not really sort of chosen her. He's trying to solve this mystery at the start, so he's quite distant from her. So she's not like Rose that way. He kind of offers her the chance to kind of see everything in that same way. And another odd callback to Rose is the dad almost being run over in the 80s.
Oh, yes.
Which is an oddly specifically similar thing. Obviously he's not, because he's saved by a passing leaf, like so often happens. And then the mum dies as well, which is very odd. Killed by autons, I imagine, by the date, because she dies on the date of the first episode.
Yeah. The other dates on the headstones were 23rd of November 1963 in the other story about Clara's family history. So it never occurred to me that the broadcast date of Rose had a plot element in that was relevant.
Killed by a wheelie bin. You never see much of the wheelie bin aspect of that story. There can't have just been one. Perhaps there was a shop window dummies, and also because this is Blackpool as well, you're far more likely to be killed by a wheelie bin than a dummy. I'll tell you that. I can imagine the promenade full of ravening dustbins, and that's what did for Rose's mum. But I don't think they ever go back to that. No. We see her weird family again, and they seem ever changing and in endless different houses. She seems to live in a mansion at some point, and then a flat at another point, and all of this stops you being kind of connected to Clara. And then the Doctor goes back to see her as a little girl. That's a bit odd as well, lurking around that playground.
Yeah.
Just hanging around the playground and wait to befriend a girl.
Delta and Billy and that, again. That's another
comparison, That's a really interesting point about the Doctor's interest in Clara. It's a thing, Russell T Davies writes very emotional stories, and Stephen Moffat tends to write very intellectual stories. So it's a fascinating point that Russell writes his Doctor getting emotionally invested in Rose, and it's a really good point you make that the Doctor's interest in Clara is a purely intellectual one. She's just a puzzle that he wants to solve. He doesn't care about her, as far as we know.
At this point, it grows. One presumes, but they're straight into that kind of. It's a kind of TARDIS team. So I hate the phrase TARDIS team. It's a kind of TARDIS team that I've never liked. There's two
fam, don't you?
There's two famalam. There's two confident and two flip. When they overload it with that kind of screwball dialogue that's intended to kind of charm us, but it's so close to smugness, and it's what happens with Rose and the 10th Doctor as well. They're kind of bantering away about how kind of great that they are, and you just feel distance from it. And that exchange between where they're choosing where to go at the start, it's structured like it's funny, and they play it like comedy, but it's not actually funny. It looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, but so does a man in a duck costume with a duck saying quack. It's that sort of thing. So it never quite comes off, and it's this odd resistance they had to making the companion a normal person. Clara is like Amy, only more so. And when Stephen eventually gets it right, he does so with Bill, I think, who is normal, just as Russell had, I think, his greatest success with Catherine Tate when they kind of stripped it all back and just made it like someone to puncture his pomposity, not kind of magnify it in that kind of screwball way. Anyway.
Yeah, there's a scene that works really well in the middle of this, where they're facing the fact that they have no idea what to do and how to progress. And that has some charm to it, because neither of them are showboating. They're both alarmed and reacting in a very sort of honest way. And Clara comes across as very human and humanises the Doctor as he struggles to work out what to do next. And there's not enough of it.
Is that just after the alarm clock goes off, as it were?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought that was. I made a note that was another reminder of just how damn good Matt Smith was at times.
His performance in this is weird in places. There were 2 or 3 scenes where he was, I don't know what he was doing. It was really odd.
Yeah, he's just on the verge of having had enough, I think, around about here. He's kind of... But, I mean, even him on half speed is still brilliant. And Jenna is brilliant. There's no faulting her. She does this sort of wet-eyed wonderment, which looks so good beside Matt Smith, who has this sort of more sort of old soul sort of thing. So she's doing all this sense of energy outward, and he's doing all this kind of contained energy. When she's looking out at the Rings of Akhaten, the pyramid of the Rings of Akhaten, which is of course a kind of a red dot on the studio wall for her, she's like, her eyes are watering with the effort of conveying the wonder of this, which it does more so than the actual special effect, because you endlessly have those scenes where they're standing in the TARDIS door these days, don't you, looking out at something. It was under the ocean a couple of weeks back. Everyone goes, look at the majesty of the universe. But it never really convinces. They always stood like quite tightly on the edge of a kind of a pointing. Anyway, sorry, it's all new to me, you see. So I was much more excited about it.
So talking about Matt Smith, I mean, he has this sort of strange bit towards the start where, I mean, I guess he's being a parody of an English tourist, but he's very sort of pointy and othery, talking about the different races and he's one of those and she's one of them and so on. It it's the sort of thing that's going to get you punched probably eventually, but perhaps Akhaten, the people are particularly polite, or they're just used to people turning up and doing that kind of thing. It does feel that there's a lot of here's the thingamy of Doodah with his special something or other, but there's no real context. It doesn't feel so much like. It's less like world build. Well, I tell you what it's like. It's like those kind of terrible Tolkien things that are all about the backstory, where there's absolutely no story in it. It's all just one thing after another after another. Yeah. And this feels a bit like that. They haven't really thought about how we're going to make that interesting. It's just a whole bunch of gabble that sort of explains it and sort of doesn't, I think.
Yeah, it feels like a science fiction short story to me. Like a big concept, a lot of thoughts going into world building, but very little into any plot. So what you actually get presented with is 50% world building and 50% getting towards a character stroke psychological resolution. So that's why I was interested to find out that I would have assumed this was all about telling us something about Clara. And it turns out that if that's what Neil Cross was asked to do, it seems that he didn't. And
apparently he'd originally spent a lot of time on the world building and the religion of these people and fleshing all that out, and then Chunks had to go in favour of leaves.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that may or may not have been better. It's just, it would have still have been a very linear story, as you pointed out, with the strange... There's partly the pacing, but there's no room... I was trying to work out how different that is to... Obviously, it's most like the end of the world, but all of the companions have had that introduction. It becomes a trope very quickly, doesn't it? That they get their second story, they go off into space, and the third one into history. But I guess the Beast Below is the second most similar, isn't it, to an attempt to do End of the World again. But there's normally more going on. Normally more of an understanding what the stakes are and where the jeopardy's going to come from, rather than just a quick cutaway shot of those three strange things that are supposed
that's
to be
right. Yeah, he's menacing.
The henchmen.
I know. Yeah, they're very well done, but rarely mentioned. There's lots of that sort of thing, isn't there? The head turning kind of type Guardian things. Yeah. It's a kind of regular thing. And I know you said you like the Star Wars stuff, and it is successful in that kind of as a Who version. There's enough different creatures there. But I tell you, that sort of thing makes me want to cringe myself inside out. Every time I see anything Star Wars, it's always like a rubbery guy going, "Okay," and then some other wobbling his head, and another one goes, "Okay," and then a man says, "It's no laughing matter, dog brain," and then one shoots the other one or something, wherever. These series on Disney that just seems to be the same thing. Every time I look at it, they're in the same
you mean, well, yes.
rooms. But it has this. So when they get to, I thought they were just going to be up and down that street for the story, and then when it cuts to the amphitheatre and they're all there together, that was my Green Baby moment. I was like going, I thought it is quite convincing, but they're all sat there sort of very primly. And that's when my fan shame really kind of rolled in. That's the moment your dad would walk in, you know.
And they're all singing like a church choir, and you're thinking, well, that one barks like a dog normally. Those 12 don't have mouths.
Well, I don't know him that well, I'm afraid. But the thing it really reminds me of is the 2012 Olympics opening ceremony, which would, of course, have been fresh in their minds then. It's kind of the same kind of both peculiar and pompous in the same way, where everyone was like going and did those feet in ancient times while someone goes around dressed as a chimney stack or something. It's that sort of summoning the ancient power of Albion. It has a bit of that feeling about it, singing the song, but yeah.
I was just going to say, am I being very miserable, but who sits and watches that and thinks, oh good, a hymn is starting? And a hymn that Murray Gold's written, so it's not even one you've heard before and you know you like. It's just some pompous-sounding, made-up alien hymn, and just long close-ups of a little girl singing ponderous notes.
It's a bold choice.
Isn't that the best way to visualize, but to sum up the awe and wonder that any of us would feel when confronted with the infinite possibility and beauty of the universe? It's a little girl singing. There's a little girl with stripes in her face, like she's come from Star Trek, singing in an angelic fashion. Yeah.
It's also that thing, like, they've been doing it for millions of years as well. It's like, no, they haven't. You know, I don't believe in a second of this. The two things I knew about this story before I watched it was that there was a long song. Yeah. The long song, I knew that term, which turned out to be not very long. They don't do it for much.
No.
And that there's a signature speech, which fans like to ask old doctors to do at conventions on a ring road outside Doncaster to slightly embarrassing effects. Ooh. And I'd like to think that they also ask the new series ones to do the speech to Gavrock from Delta that Capaldi's dragged up on stage at Comic Con and asked to do bits of Happiness Patrol, Go On, End My Life, or something. Yeah, but yeah, it's seen as a profound speech. My view on that will come to when we get to it, but preview, it's terrible.
Giles, you got something you wanted to get out there?
I was just thinking that I kind of feel it works. Yeah, the Clara thing. It reminded me of it was very difficult to keep track of exactly which Clara and where in the timeline we were at. And I was thinking, okay, well this does work quite nicely as yet another introduction to Clara, but we've had 5 of them already, or to some extent, and it's you do wonder if that was quite the right place to do it. And I guess I can't remember what they had in Basil St. John about her as a character, how much we actually found out about her.
It doesn't tell us anything about her, though, does it? It tells us a fact that her mother died when she was young, but it doesn't explain why she talks like a character from a screwball comedy. And neither of those things tell us anything about why she's impossible and is fractured through time. No. So, they're 3 pieces from 3 different jigsaws.
I remember enjoying this at the time when I first watched it, and then I kind of picked up on other fans' reaction, and I sort of hadn't watched it since transmission. And again, I was watching this earlier and thinking, I'm quite enjoying this, and now I'm listening to you lots and going off it again.
Well, this is we've been through this 1,000 times. The reason we enjoy these so much is because we have been living in the era of the soon-to-be ex-showrunner,
Yeah.
And I keep looking back at these things thinking, wasn't I happy? Why wasn't I happy with this at the time? Why did I think this was a mediocre episode? This is gold compared to...
Well, we're also spoiled by a glut of competence. I mean, all those monster masks are incredibly competent. The great actors, Matt Smith and Jenna Coleman, amazing casting, going to go on to do great things. The creature design, the general special effects, spacey effects are all pretty good. All of that, everyone is doing this, which leaves you, and you sort of get that every week. You know, it's quite a fattening. It's quite a fattening diet. So you sort of end up sort of picking away at trying to find a healthy vegetable, as it were. You know, trying to find something at the centre that you can go. I always have this thing with Doctor Who. If you're a lifetime fan, it's like anything that you love. It's like a rope back through your life. Everything else, you have no influence in the things that change around you. Your friends coming and going, deaths of loved ones, the world itself. But this you've got this rope that goes back, and it's a rope that's like you sort of tap in like a rock climber. You put in it hangs there, but every now and again you need a fastening point for it, and. When you're young, you've got all these great stories or things that you love, and they're all these hard points where your rope is attached. But if a few years pass and you don't feel you get a point to attach it in, if it doesn't give you a good like moment, you can like when Tom appears in the museum. And you're like, go, oh my God, and you're hammering in. That's me. I'm a fan again now. And then you start paying out the rope again, waiting for the next one. This time, and the current era, I kind of feel, whenever everyone feels a bit negative about it, they're just a bit lost. They're just like, give me something to believe in. Give me something to hang on to. So you're not down on it. It's fine. It's all fine. It's all fine, but you just want something. Anyway. There you go, that's a very extended metaphor.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind the singing because I guess it's a different thing. I mean, we haven't had many other stories where people sing. So I wish there was a bit more to it. I mean, as Gav kind of suggests, there's a bit of singing and then they stop and then the plot advances a bit. I suppose there's a section where she sings and it causes a doorway to move. So there is another thing that they use it for. But
that's a neat link to Delta and the Bannermen. There, as the singing suddenly changes its abilities midway through the plot, depending on the requirements.
Yeah.
They open that doorway and they just run around the corner to go to the same place outside the doorway they've just come through. They don't they?
There is that.
It's very like after the amphitheatre. It's like watching someone else play a computer game. Where they've got to get stage by stage. You've got to get the bike.
On the ZX81, there's very little of it.
You've got to get the bike across the thing. You've got to work out how to get the door open and hold the door open.
Yes.
Then you've got to defeat what you think's the boss, but it isn't the boss. And then there's another boss. It just unfolds like that as you try to.
Yes. Yes. I did say at the time that Sonic Screwdriver's doing a lot of literal and metaphorical heavy lifting.
Oh yeah, very good.
I'm just thinking, going back to the structural thing. Sorry, I'm kind of catching up on things now, and that's sort of the 20-minute mark, and I don't mind, but that's so it's sort of pretty much the halfway mark in the story. She hits a bum note or whatever, and then then it all comes off the rails. I'm just trying to think with End of the World for comparison, whether there is all that much anything sinister, because in the first half of that, because to my mind,
that's what I was wondering.
You have a lot of fascinating. Let's meet all these weird people, and then you just, and it's only when the computer suddenly goes boom.
Well, aren't they dishing out mysterious
the robot
eggs?
Spiders, yeah.
Yeah.
The spiders going around.
Ah, yes, you've got the spiders scuffling
and you
around,
get
so you've
sinister
got
undertones.
some hint that there's something weird going on, haven't you? Yeah. So that's laid in earlier.
Yeah, I just kind of felt adrift that there was no foreshadowing at all, because you thought the menace was going to be that the girl was being chased by two ne'er-do-wells, but it turned out they were just her totally legitimate chaperones, and therefore that jeopardy appeared and disappeared in a moment.
Just on their way to take her for some human sacrifice. Or
Yeah.
whatever.
But
Must be Monday.
you don't find out till later. I mean, maybe I'm being ungenerous and perhaps not paying attention, but I am genuinely not clear on the mechanics of what was going on. She was there because she had all of the stories, and therefore she had all of the soul juice to feed the monster, which was a ritual that has been going on for thousands of years. But she didn't think she was going to be sacrificed. Did the audience, were the audience complicit? Did anyone know she was going to be sacrificed? Because it was a total surprise to her.
I mean, the issue is that was she not born on the same day that the old one died? Which then gives you the question of, so isn't there a bit of a gap then between when she's, just a few months old or days or whatever, when no one's available to do the singing?
They did say they only do the singing every so often, don't
1,000
they?
years.
Okay, fair enough.
So, but she then did her singing in the auditorium, but was then lifted in a teleport bubble by we don't know who.
The Rani, presumably, it looks like.
And then she ended up in the other place with the bloke who was already there doing some singing.
Oh, yes.
We don't know how he got
wasn't
there or what his function was. Then the vigil turn up, and we're told that the function of the vigil is to feed her to grandfather.
Right.
And she
But only when
seems
he
to
wakes
know
up.
about the vigil. So did she know she was going to be sacrificed?
Is that a sort of emergency plan if the song goes wrong? Could that go, and then they tow it, and then got to physically throw her to him?
Yeah.
It seems a bit.
Because she says that they want to eat our souls, and but I thought she was there to. Sorry, it was just too easy. I genuinely don't know what her function was, what she thought her function was, what everyone else thought her function was. Therefore, what are the stakes at any given moment? What's trying to be avoided, and who's in on it?
Yeah.
Maybe she's a two-stage rocket or something. She's got in the first phase she's there to keep him asleep, but if he does wake up, she's then the
that was it.
fuel or
Like
something.
he was waking up, and the song was meant to keep him asleep, wasn't it? But then we were told that she was meant to feed him, not keep him asleep.
Well, clearly the last one wasn't sacrificed because they died only recently because she's only young. So so it does sound like that wasn't a. It's not entirely clear.
No, and this is why I struggled
and the doctor says that he's waking up anyway, doesn't he? At some point.
Yeah.
And then it turns out not to be the
just
thing
song.
they're singing to either. So there's this weird red herring of the bloke in the box. What is the bloke in the box?
No, poor guy.
He's an alarm clock. Well, that makes it perfectly clear. So
Well, look, he's the star of his own story, isn't he? He just isn't the star of this one.
Can we watch that one? Yeah. I mean, she's a singer. Perhaps he's like, he's like the manager or something, or like.
Simon Cowell. Sits there in his box.
Yeah, demanding is. It's not clear, and or even what I mean. We could go ask him why a son feeds off memory juice at all with a face that sort of smiles. I mean,
big face appears.
the last time, this kind of emoji face. The last time I saw a son with a face was in the Teletubbies. And I'm wondering if this is that one, but in old age. It starts off as like a baby son giggling at these sort of preschool antics. And eventually, in its declining years, it just needs to feed off kind of opera music. And the burning red giant version of the Teletubby sun.
Yeah.
So, like, what?
If you don't feed it enough royal jelly, anyway.
Yeah, it's just not funny anymore. That's what that is. And then the Doctor gives it that speech, which is very much the type of speech you sort of get in this era. That sort of that puts him at the centre of things. I don't know if it's just me. I always like him more as the kind of the student dropout, a kind of a hero, but not a superhero.
Yeah.
But when he gives these speeches that sort of, I did this, I was there, I saw that, all the stuff he does regularly,
Turns to Rutger Hauer from the end of Blade Runner.
Yes, I guess it just comes. He's just so arrogant, and it's so undignified, as well. He even misreads the line. There's a line where he says, "I've walked in universes where the laws of physics were devised by the mind of a madman."
He does. I noticed
A
that.
madman, and you think that really kills that at the end. Not a madman. I wanted to watch some of the YouTube versions to see if it was done right by Colin or Sylvester, which would be the great irony. But and then it doesn't even work, as you said.
Yeah, it really falls flat. The idea that, it's again, it's another sci-fi cliche, isn't it? It's overloading the master brain, and you just put too much stuff in that it wants.
This is Neil Cross's. Neil Cross is
win.
not a science fiction person. That's his. This is supposed to be the end. This is supposed to be the Doctor's big superhero moment.
It wants memories. The Doctor's got too much of that, so it mysteriously just contracts into nothing. But then the Doctor stops, I don't know, remembering things too soon, and it puffs back up, completely negating the last 5 minutes, including the pompous speech. Everything's back to status quo, and then Clara turns up with a leaf.
Yeah.
Perhaps it feeds off melodrama. Perhaps it's not stories and everything. Perhaps it's just again bathos. It's just she turns up, and sometimes you feel sorry for an actor, don't you? She's standing there with that unconvincing leaf,
Which is a different
she's
leaf.
wobbling
it's
in
twice
her...
the size of the leaf
Yeah.
that hit her dad in the face.
Yeah. She's wobbling it in her hand to try and draw attention to it a little bit, and she has to say, "This is the most important leaf in human history," which is quite a line for anyone
It is.
to say. And then suddenly, it's at that point the sun goes, "Oh, absolutely, I've had enough of this." That's enough. You really, that puts the tin hat on it for me. Thank you very much, Clara and her leaf. And again, that's not very modest to say that
It's
the
a
leaf...
wafer thin mint.
Yeah, what it
It
is.
would sound like a wafer thin leaf.
It is.
There's a load of ADR as well on that cuts away to the Doctor as she starts saying, "Oh, my mum, if she hadn't died, think of all the potential stuff and the life she would have lived
Yeah.
and all of the things." And then it cuts to the Doctor, who reiterates the same point.
Right.
It's a shame, really, that no one has thought to tell it a story before, because if the thing that it can't cope with is the possibility, then fiction is gonna really floor it, isn't it, compared with reality?
Should have got one of those choose your own adventure books and read that to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
yeah.
like, you're in the city port of traps. Will you fight the goblin or go to the tavern? And then the son would have been like giggling, would have been delighted by the impossible possibilities of the impossible woman. Whatever.
Yeah,
So-
absolutely. Yeah, and then also, the other analogy that this occurs to me is with the Aztecs, because basically Clara is trying to stop the human sacrifice from happening, in the same way that Barbara tries to stop it from happening, and of course the Doctor steps in the Aztecs. In this one, the 11th Doctor's definitely aiding and abetting. So I guess the story here is that you can change quite a lot of history so long as it's not your history. But I suppose we've learned that anyway in the course of the series.
If it's set before the date of transmission, you can't change it. If it's afterwards, on or after, you can. Everybody knows this, Rich. They don't need to be facetious.
Where did I see the other day? Somebody tweeted an idea that said they should set a Doctor Who story in the past and meet a historical figure, and the Doctor, as the Doctor is prone to do these days, shouts a brief biography in their face as to who they are, but leaves the viewer thinking, "Oh, this again, as often happens these days, this is a historical character I'm not familiar with." And then at the end of that story, the Doctor accidentally erases them from history, and that's why we don't know who they are.
Ah,
Somebody tweeted that. That's a decent idea. You shouldn't be chucking that out on Twitter.
no.
Yeah. Get £320 for that. On the market today. So what happens, Giles, if a sun vanishes from the centre of its rings? What happens to the rings and then the planets around?
Well, you'd
Do they
imagine it.
just gently fly off into...
Is it better or
Well-
worse than if there's a giant dragon in a moon.
Oh God!
Can they balance out in one star system? If you lay a moon egg at the same time as the sentient sun vanishes, does it?
Well, they cut away slightly before we never see anything that happens really afterwards, which is a bit of an annoyance that you feel like there should be a closing scene there to kind of put a bow on it. And yeah, you don't. And the way they cut away, you think, well, is it collapsing into a black hole, or what's happening to it? Is it just
What sort of face is it pulling at the end?
Well, yeah.
Does it look constipated?
It should be going, no!
It's got eye closed, tongue out, I think.
Poo emoji.
If when they die, they just collapse in on themselves,
Well, that's
if
the
it's
thing.
the same mass,
Yeah.
would it not carry on as normal?
Pretty much, yes.
If
Yeah.
it was
If you-
small
Over
but sad.
over R squared.
If it's small but sad, yeah, then it's then it should.
But it's not putting out any heat, presumably.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. I saw they relying on the radiation from the star for heat.
I wasn't even
heat and
clear whether it
light.
was a star or a planet.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because it's burning, isn't it? It's like burning
Yes.
hot. It looks like a sun, but the Doctor keeps saying this is the planet where all life evolved. But it's got a ring system. I don't know what they're
Right.
Yeah,
guessing at.
they seem to live on different rocks in the ring rather than different.
Yeah,
planets,
that was the
don't
other
they?
thing that frustrated me about the ending is Clara's in the auditorium and it's as if she's watching the Doctor, but the Doctor cannot be in her line of sight. So it's just sort of edited really clunkily, as if to suggest that somehow she knows what's going on, whether there's a monitor screen just off to the side. Because if he's doing his bit in that chamber where the chair was, and she has to get on a moped and fly to meet him at the last minute, but she's watching the whole thing in the auditorium as if he's 6 feet in front of her, and it's just cut in a way that we're not supposed to notice that she cannot possibly be watching what he's doing. And just the geography of it and the muddiness of it all makes it hard to know what you're rooting for, and then with a big speech piled on top, you just start to drift away from it emotionally.
No, it's a bit much to make fun about the reality of what happens when a star disappears in the context of all this sort of nonsense. But this is a show which is liked, and that children who are kind of scientifically minded are kind of drawn to. And I think ordinary. I hate to use the phrase ordinary members, but no, a lot of people know a lot of stuff about how planets work, and it's all very well to do this kind of magical sort of endings and stuff like this. But I do think it does in its way erode the whole thing. You have to have a certain kind of bedrock of the rules of space.
Absolutely.
Or else it's just all nonsense. It all just falls apart if the centre doesn't hold.
This is the thing, and this is the objection I've had to... we joked about Day of the Moon, but I get deeply frustrated with this notion that, it's Doctor Who, anything could happen. So, then why doesn't the Doctor just defeat the baddie with his laser eyes? Because anything can happen. Just do anything because it's science fiction. You've got to have a set of rules, and that's structure of storytelling rather than science fiction. You just introduce the idea that planets can just do whatever, and the moon can hatch out and it's a dragon, and don't think about it because it's just science fiction or it's just a kids show or any of these half-assed things. That's bad storytelling. That's not being anal about science. Amidst all of the fantasy nonsense that we are accepting and accustomed to in Doctor Who, if the mechanics of astronomy come up in some mundane way, that it should be moderately respected, and then you can build your science fantasy stories around it. But just chucking the laws of physics out the window, it doesn't become the world that we recognise. It's as jarring as characters behaving weirdly.
Yeah, it grates with me just mostly. Usually I'm happy to take my science brain off the hook for most Doctor Who, but the thing that always grates with me is where I can just see that there was one line they could have added, or there was something they cut that just failed to explain, and it would have been because coming up with it's just like Fanon kind of stuff. just coming up with nerdy science explanations that sound borderline plausible is a fun aspect of things, really, and just keeps it that bit closer to reality. And as you say, Gav, I think that's the point, that it should count as much as, just in terms of actually keeping some kind of foot in the world someone can recognise, it should count as much as character work and things like that.
We've stopped laughing now. I notice.
There you go.
We've got quite serious about this, haven't we?
Pondering the infinite, aren't we?
Yes. Well, I mean, and I suppose pondering the infinite. I mean, it's interesting that there's sort of 7 or 8 different sentient races here, but they all only have one religion. I mean, I guess if there's one thing we've learnt on our own planet is that we've only got one sentient race, but we've got a hell of a lot of religions, and in fact, even something like Christianity in this country, there's probably about 200 different versions of that. I mean, they're doing pretty well, I think, to all get together behind this one ceremony.
Well, if your son has a face on it, you might have a more targeted view of what you're going to worship. You may all get behind that sort of thing. Better worship him.
That's a fair point. I mean, does it qualify as a religion? If somebody goes, "Wow, what evidence do you have? Have you seen the face?"
Yeah, it's not so much faith. I see what you're saying.
Crouch End Festival chorus I saw on the end credits, that really made me laugh. I don't know why. It's like it's like something out of Round the Horn. I just liked it. And there's this opera being sung to keep a son happy, and it says, "Well, thanks to the Crouch End Festival chorus."
Yes.
I found that amusing.
Yeah, it rang a bell with me because they're on the Divine Comedy album Fin de Siècle.
Right.
Back in the day.
Perhaps that all links up through, because there's connections with that, isn't it? Neil Hannon and
yes. Neil Hannon, Joby Talbot. I think they all hang out together in some form or other.
Yes. Random fact: Jenna Coleman and I attended the same school in Blackpool, 15 years apart.
All right.
I was head boy and she was head girl. So there is a board at the school with both our names on the same list, me and Jenna Coleman, which is quite odd. And Clara's mum in this is played by an actress, Nicola Thorpe, who would be a regular in Corrie a few years later. And she was also at the same school. She was 2 years behind Jenna, and she had all the lead roles after she left. She was like the next star theatre girl. And all of us had the same drama teacher, as did Ian Levine, who also attended the same school, but before me, and Peter Purvis as well. So I think it may be the only school. I think it may be the only school to have had 2 companions out of it.
That is one hell of a genealogy.
Clearly on some sort of Doctor Who hellmouth of some kind, of which I am the least player on the board.
Ian Levine did drama list.
Ian Levine, oddly enough, I got this kind of the old Arnoldians newsletter a few years ago, and there was a feature about Ian in there. And Ian, it was fascinating to see that he's obsessed with other aspects of his life, as he is with Who. He'd organised a reunion at the school for his year group, and in full Ian style, he organised everything. He brought back the teachers to teach a full day of classes. And everyone had to come back, and they had to do.
I just want to sit under my blanket.
And he really specified the PE kit everyone was going to wear as well. In there, everyone is getting all his old school friends back in their 50s and forcing them into short shorts. And that's honestly. And I was reading this article like, this is weird.
Did you have to buy a big book at the end of it?
Yeah. So, sometimes you feel like you're in a bit of a soap opera, and these characters are just having these roles. Anyway.
Yeah. And then he sat them down and made them watch his reconstruction of the Nightmare Fair.
At the end of the day. Bless him. So yeah, there you go. What else I got? Nothing else.
H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh yes, yeah.
I know nothing about H.P. Lovecraft, but that's where Akhaten comes from.
Oh right. Oh, it sounds Egyptian.
Oh, they didn't really do it justice. It did come up with more exciting than the sun with a face, I think.
Oh, is it supposed to be like a great old one, kind of eldritch?
Yes. Yeah.
That was very big in the New Adventures, wasn't it? They just explained away all the
Fenric, great intelligence.
Yeah, all the gods are supposed to be Lovecraftian, weren't they? and the Celestial Toymaker and everybody. But he's obviously an Eternal, so what if they know?
Has he got tentacles on the side then? Has he got kind of eldritch tentacles?
That's why he wears the garb of a Mandarin.
That's his drag name at the weekend, Eldritch Tentacles.
Well, you never. Well, you never see under his cloak, so possibly he's behaving a bit like old colony staff.
Yeah, he might glide around.
Just snaking along under there.
I just repeated that fact without checking it. I can't find any evidence that is anything to do with H.P. Lovecraft.
It's a bit like that Moffat quote, isn't it, about more Doctor Who than ever before? I mean, everyone thinks he said it, but nobody can find out where.
All this page says is it was an homage to both the unknowable alien gods depicted in the macabre stories of H.P. Lovecraft and the anthropomorphized moon in A Trip to the Moon.
Ooh.
But elsewhere I read that name comes from H.P. Lovecraft, but the 8 seconds of Googling suggests that's not true.
Oh, I'll tell you one random thing that annoyed me that should have been caught in the script edit. The Doctor refers to it as the grandfather for a while, this god. In the one story where he refers to himself in passing as having been there with his granddaughter, and it really sounds like, the first time I've seen it, it really sounded like those two things were going to be a thing. That this granddaughter,
they've got to be linked.
Grandfather.
Yeah,
why you use
so
the word?
incongruous.
And I thought, well, you just get your little scissors in there and snip that out.
Because calling the creature the grandfather was an irrelevance. If they were that in love with the little reference to Susan, then just change the name of the creature to something else.
And was the grandfather the one in the box, or was the grandfather the son?
They changed their minds halfway through. They thought it was the one in the box, but it turned out to be the planet/sun. I think. But yeah, totally agree with you.
What's up with the TARDIS translator?
Yeah.
So why does the dog creature sound like a dog?
Doesn't do barking.
Because it wouldn't seem like Star Wars if it worked.
Fair enough.
Is it just me? Is that the worst thing about The Mandalorian, that the aliens all talk English now? It makes it feel more like Star Trek. They're supposed to chatter and talk nonsense. Anyway, sorry, carry on. It's the single worst thing out of many.
Well, okay, I've yet to watch it. Also, Clara is very convinced that TARDIS doesn't like her. I mean, could it not just be that the Doctor's locked the door?
Yeah, she doesn't
like every other time.
Well, it makes a kind of zing noise, so that explains everything.
Right.
Fair enough.
Did it?
She rattles on the door and she looks at it, and they play that annoying zing noise, and then she goes, "Oh, it doesn't like me."
Is that like the deadbolt going on at the back at the time? So like cooking, putting it on the latch. A link between these two stories is that they both have a moment where the Doctor goes, "I think I might have miscalculated. I might have got it wrong." It's a small thing, but both go, he just goes, he just has a moment. And,
I was thinking of Remembrance of the Daleks, but that's
he does do.
He says, "I think I might have gone a little too far."
A little too far. Yeah, that's it. Oh yeah, miscalculated is the other, a little too far. But he kind of just goads it, and then goads the villain, and then
Yeah.
They've both got bikes/mopeds.
Yep.
That was another Star Wars reference injected by the producer Marcus Wilson, I think.
All right.
A reference to Return of the Jedi, the speeder bikes in Return of the Jedi.
They're more Flash Gordon than anything, the mopeds.
It does have a shot of her hanging off the Doctor's back on the bike, which we've just had in the previous story as well. So it's a bit odd. One of those things that you get. It's a nasty prop, that bike, isn't it? It's a bit of a.
I remember my memory of the time was that it was extremely embarrassing, but I didn't hate that scene this time.
No, I remember that as well. That seemed to be something that people ripped into for some reason. That particular shot, and I thought, well, okay, it might not be the best effect, but considering the amount of stuff they're throwing at the screen in this one, in terms of visual, all of these aliens, I mean, it's quite a lot of good kit bashing going on with the aliens. It can be quite fun.
Yeah.
I think
spotted the Hoiks.
The Hoiks with something else, yes.
Thing stuck on like a Hath.
It had a Hath breathing apparatus. Yeah, exactly.
And some of the aliens from End of the World, the ones with the big hoods,
right?
They didn't have hoods this time.
Ah.
Hot Pylene.
Yeah, that's it.
My eye was drawn by the one who seemed to be trying to sell a fire extinguisher. He kept doing. You see him 2 or 3 times. He's just holding up this fire extinguisher, going, "Buy my fire extinguisher." And each time you see him, you can't not see him. So
I like the people who had completely oval face that was just full of flashing lights. It's just so visually exciting and just so hilariously, preposterously pointless. You just think, what function?
yeah.
What civilization do these people have?
Can you buy all
Maybe
of
it's how they
these
communicate.
as little figures? Have they all been done?
You can buy the Vigil, because I sculpted that for the Doctor Who figurine collection.
It's another for
£320. The songs in both stories actually are part of, form part of the story. So you get, I mean, among other things, I suppose you get "Why Do Fools Fall in Love," which is actually, Billy trying to win over Delta, and then you've got the long song in this one, and the thing that opens the doorway. So yes, I mean they perform more than one function, I suppose.
Non-diegetic. Is it non-diegetic, or is it
No,
diegetic? It's diegetic
Yeah.
music if it's actually in the world. Yeah, I always get them mixed up.
Once I learned that word, I dropped it into conversation casually as
Right.
as I could.
Yeah. Also both stories have more than one alien civilization, which you don't necessarily always get.
True. Child actors.
Yes,
Have we
absolutely.
not done that? Yes.
who sing?
Both with extremely good prosthetics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they haven't ever been revisited. I think both of them. No one's gone back and used any of this rich territory. I'll tell you what, the Malcolm Coulter feels like. That feels like it's heading towards that comic book company that buys up, that's done the Happiness Patrol and things. The one done by by Gareth Kavanagh and the Omega and everything else. You kind of feel there's going to be some Bannermen comics coming soon. If it can be done, it will be done. That's the Doctor Who world. That's the way Doctor Who works. If you wait long enough.
Yeah. We've got the moment in both stories where a couple falls in love, I suppose. I mean, or maybe Delta's just exerting an influence over Billy, but yes, Clara's parents as well.
Yeah. Through the power of nature, in one, the song of a bee, in the other, the fall of a leaf. Fall of a leaf.
Yeah.
Thud of the leaf.
Yeah.
It's odd it's a leaf. You could imagine that done as like a page of a newspaper or something as well, but it's just...
Yes.
It's very odd that, I can't, I'll be running around but a leaf's in my face.
My vision is impaired, I cannot see.
Such an odd choice. I know, a leaf.
Yeah.
Or like a bird flies into his face, which would be ironic with Clara's ending. And she opens this book and produces a kind of flattened rook. So it goes, it's the most important rook in history.
Well, in the second, yeah.
If it was in Blackpool, it would have been like a chip paper or like someone's foil from their crack pipe would have been on his face. Should have been keeping that forever. That'd be more Blackpool.
Were they always in Blackpool? Did they just move there?
I don't know. There's lots of references to Blackpool. Is all of her houses in Blackpool in the future? The odd thing about Clara is now we finally meet one Clara, and it is the Uber Clara or whatever. Is even she seems to be 20 different people. She's a childminder. She's an English teacher. Yes. She lives in a big house. She lives in a flat. She does Christmas with her family. She does. You'd never quite pin her down for that.
And she's a bit like Dodo as well. She starts out with a northern accent, and then it seems to fade a bit over time. I mean, I don't know. I suppose we all.
Hey up, love. We all done that. We all done that happen.
She lives on the Powell estate for a period of time because she comes out the same block of flats as Rose, doesn't she?
Oh right.
Oh, gone.
She's such a copy, that girl. She's so determined. Such a,
Yeah.
Oh, the other odd thing as well is she is rightly sort of furious or rightly sort of slightly disturbed that the Doctor has gone back and visited, that he was in that playground at that time. But she never goes, I'd love to see me mum. Can we go and see her? Which would be the natural thing to do if you'd lost a parent, I think. I think it'd be the first thing I'd want to go and do in a TARDIS, is go and visit my lost loved ones. But she just like goes, oh, well, forget that then. Let's go home.
I mean, it's interesting also, so building on that point, so in Father's Day, the Doctor's very clear they really oughtn't to sort of, they can stand and watch, they oughtn't really get involved, but in this one, the Doctor's quite happy to start sort of, running up and asking, Clara's name and so on. It feels like he's tempting fate a wee bit there.
Yeah, the whole thing about isn't there a thing later where she's sent to join him by Missy in the first place? Clara and the Doctor meet because of that.
The woman in the shop.
Yeah, the woman in the shop. That's just in the story before this, and then Missy refers to it a bit later in kind of Capaldi time, but it's never quite. So Clara is completely bonded to the Doctor's timeline, but is also sent there. I never quite squared that either. Perhaps someone can write in. Do you have a did you have a letters page?
We have a scornful reviewing system.
Sorry about that, boys.
Occasionally, to explain that, very occasionally we get a review on Apple Podcasts, and they're about equally divided, of people saying how fantastic we are and others saying how we can't help making strange noises or
even when
or sounding like we read The Guardian. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah.
How dare
But what
they?
if it's not eating crisps all the way through and they still complain?
Sorry, anyway, Gav, this must be good.
Does Clara know the exact details of how her parents met with her mum saving her dad's life?
She does.
Because is that clever, parallel with the death of Danny Pink, who was killed carelessly stepping into a road without a leaf hitting him in the face?
No.
That's true.
I didn't think it was.
Where was the leaf? Where was the leaf then when we needed it?
That's it.
Them trees again.
It was a witty
them
quip.
Unreliable trees that are never around when you need them. Yeah.
No, it suddenly occurred to me. I think that's an accidental parallel, isn't it?
Yeah, ironically, almost immediately after in The Forest of the Night as well.
Yes.
Was it?
You think there'd be tons of leaves blowing around if they just stuck to the laws of physics, but no.
Is that the one he gets? No, he doesn't get run over in that one.
No.
No, but it's a story after that.
That's weird as well. This Akhaten is very linked to the trees one, isn't it? It is that magical realism time that the trees can come and occupy all of London, and then, but the concrete's all fine, and you just have to kind of go with it. It's odd though. We do choose our fights, don't we? With these things, it's quite easy target stuff. If the TARDIS drags Earth back into its orbit from having been stolen by Davros, we're kind of fine with that because it's all because all the gang's doing it.
My suspicion is that we actually quite enjoyed it, but we've got quite cross because of certain features in it.
Yeah, I enjoyed Rings of Akhaten. It was entirely new to me. It was much better than the reputation that had preceded it. I found it very pleasant company. I was thrilled to be with Matt Smith again. It felt like a lovely, warm, mid-season bit of fun, but that's too short a thing to say on a podcast. You've got to get into you've got to get into the other bits. It was great. It was great.
Watching it, thinking of things to talk about versus watching it, thinking, this is really decent bit of TV.
And there's no point in being cruel about Delta either, because it's so well meant and well done within the powers that they had. It's well shot. The script. It's not scintillating stuff, but it's all clear, and everyone is moved around. Everyone's got a little bit to do. Both of them, lovely.
Yeah.
But just weird.
Yes.
They're both so weird.
And over 5 million people would agree with you because all of those episodes got more than 5 million viewers on the night.
Right. Right.
Are you trying to make a point there of some kind, Richard? Because I can't.
I just
fathom.
noticed that was those were the viewing
Just
figures.
random numbers.
Yeah.
What was the audience appreciation number for Akhaten out of interest?
Oh,
No idea.
Out of 10.
That's good.
Out of 10.
Akhaten out of 10.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
84.
Well, that's pretty good.
It's quite a big
That's
number.
pretty
It's a
good,
big
isn't it?
number.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
I always find it very hard to take those numbers seriously. I mean, I don't know. It's
They once came around our house,
all right.
the ratings people who did the audience appreciation things, to survey the whole family and interviewed us all about what we'd watched and wrote it all down into one of those reports. But I was young and I was gutted at the time because you're only allowed to talk about things that are on that week. And it was out of season for Doctor Who because I was literally as like a 9-year-old child, ready to do my bit to go in and give it a golden review, whatever it was, like Underworld Part 3 or whatever. I was like going in there, 100. I'm going to go do my bit, but it wasn't on, so I wasn't allowed to talk about it. So I sulked and didn't talk about anything at all.
Those classic audience responses from like 1964. Doctor Who has got very silly.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, look. I mean, thanks, Gary, for joining us. Thanks all of you for your thoughts on these two stories. Certainly, I think we've given our listeners plenty to chew over and think about. And yeah, if you've got any theories out there on what's going on, or if you think we've got it all wrong, by all means, write in and tell us, and then we'll know. And if you like what we do, then you could always go and contradict those people on Apple Podcasts who say that we make strange noises and sound a bit too posh. I don't know quite what you're thinking about. Whoever said that? We're just ordinary blokes, aren't we?
We're just
innocent
normal,
men.
innocent men.
And you never know, we may well be back in a month to talk about two more. In the meantime, I guess it's time to say goodbye. So, so long, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Goodbye. Here's to the future.
Bye.
I think I've set a new low for an outro there. They've never been very convincing, but that was worse than most, I think.
Can someone tell me what the innocent man thing is?
Oh, well, I asked that earlier.
Sorry, it's Hacker the dog from CBBC.
Right.
With his, I don't know what the context was, but him and the presenter girl.
Goodness.
Here's a clip from my other podcast. Hello and welcome to If It's Hurting, It's Not Working, our podcast all about work, why we work, how we work, and what makes a great job.
In this episode, our theme is going to be around money and how that intertwines with mental health and how it also plays a part in the role of our working lives.
So I wanted to talk about an occasion when I found myself in a debt spiral. And I guess there were two things that I think were going on. The first was I was burying my head. Just didn't really want to think about it. I hear about situations like this from other people too. The bill comes in, you really don't want to look at it. You stick it in a drawer, forget about it. And because it's being settled by direct debit, it's not like that's a fatal situation, but it just means that the sum that you're in debt is going up and up. But there's also shame involved. There's a thing in our society, I think, that says you ought to be able to cope with this stuff if you're an adult. And once you're in a bit of a mess, you don't really want to have to admit to anyone that that's the situation. And I've talked previously also about having grown up in a society that sort of sees men as providers, that not being able to provide for your family feels like a failure as well. That's a story of how I got into the situation.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I expect there's thousands and thousands of people out there that have been in the same situation at that point in their lives where we went into a massive recession. And I think the thing about that is that it's not through any fault of your own either. Yet it can still bring so much shame to the situation because you, without being the stereotypical putting labels on genders, but the man does tend to feel a lot of pressure to be the person that's the sole breadwinner, bringing in the money, paying the bills, supporting his family and providing for them. So there's no wonder that brings so much pressure and, like you say, you use the word shame there, upon yourself, because you feel like, in a way, I guess you were failing to do what you needed to do.
When I was a boy, generally, if you were in work and you were earning, you would have enough to cope with the bills life threw at you, so long as your expectations were realistic. But I think increasingly that's not the case. I think increasingly you can find yourself in a situation where you don't have enough coming in to meet your expenditure, not because you're spending in a profligate manner, not because you have unrealistic expectations, but just because of circumstance, just because of prices going up. Really, don't be ashamed, and don't be afraid to reach out for help. If you need help from places like food banks, it's absolutely no shame. It's one of those things. And take the help that's offered, and then maybe in a few years' time, it'll be on your foot and you'll be able to offer help to somebody yourself. But yeah, take the help when it's offered and don't be too proud.